In Betrayal, when Liberian teenager Cindor Reeves' sister Agnes marries former disgraced President of Liberia Charles Taylor, Taylor was just an idealistic populist rebel, but his methodology quickly shifted to authoritarian rule after he secured Liberia's presidency. Betrayal is directed by Lana McDonald, and this is her second feature after Mum and Me from 2015. This film, Betrayal, gets off to a bit of a shaky start, but once the director finally sits down with Cindor Reeves and gets him to basically tell his life story, the film is quite compelling and actually quite thrilling as well. Cindor Reeves and his sister Agnes, their parents passed away at an early age, and Cindor Reeves and his sister Agnes were living a pretty much a normal life in Liberia. And then in a matter of a few days, Agnes marries the rebel Charles Taylor, Liberian rebel Charles Taylor. Charles Taylor was in the United States for about a decade or so, and he comes back to Liberia and he marries Cindor's sister Agnes, and in a matter of a few days, Charles he's basically just a young boy, teenager at the time, and basically his life changes very quickly. Suddenly, Cindor, he has a father figure in his life. Charles Taylor takes him under his wing and teaches him everything about life, and he gives him education and money. And suddenly, Cindor has wealth and a nice home and butlers and servants and everything. And growing up as a young boy, Cindor really idolizes Charles Taylor. He really believes Charles Taylor when Taylor says that he wants to revolutionize Liberia and bring democracy to the country and bring education and wealth and stop the civil war in the country. But as Cindor grows up, he starts to see the bad side to Charles Taylor. He doesn't really trust he trusts his methods. He doesn't really believe his public image, Charles Taylor's public image to the world and to his country is very different to how he's acting in his private life. And then when Cindor finally, when he becomes an adult and becomes grown up, Charles Taylor gives him an unofficial role in his government, and then Cindor uses this role to basically spy and collect information on Charles Taylor's actions in Liberia. He he copies documents, official documents, and he eavesdrops on very important meetings, and he collects this information. And one day, the newspaper Washington Post in the United States, they get invited by Charles Taylor to document his life, and then Cindor Reeves gives a contact in the Washington Post, and basically over the years he slowly gives away information about Charles Taylor's actions in Liberia. And now when the director is sitting down with Cindor, giving him Cindor's given his life story, he's basically in hiding, I think, in Ghana at the moment, but he's basically tried to get asylum in Holland and in Canada, but he's been rejected by the government, even though he's pretty much risked his life to out Charles Taylor and help his home country Liberia. But at the moment, his wife and his kids were able to gain asylum in Canada, and they're living their life there. So Cindor is basically separated from his family at the moment. So really, this document doesn't really give you much information about Charles Taylor that you really can't see in a Wikipedia entry, but it does give an insight into the danger that Cindor Reeves had to go through to give away inside information. And it's really such a heartbreaking story that Cindor Reeves isn't able to have a real home, even though he was a patriot for his own country, and even though he has a family and kids. He's basically stuck in hiding maybe for the rest of his life. He doesn't really trust anybody in his own country, and doesn't really trust anybody anywhere else as well. So he basically is, unless he travels to another country again, tries to get asylum, he's basically stuck to hiding maybe for the rest of his life. And that's really such a heartbreaking story. But for me, the first 15-20 minutes of the film was very like a non-linear, and we meet Cindor and we don't know who he is. The film doesn't give us information to who he is and where he is and what he's doing at the moment and why he's in hiding. He gives some information about like some man come to his home and threaten him, but we don't really get a lot of backstory to what's going on. And before I watched this documentary, I read some information about the history of Liberia and Charles Taylor, but I was still confused as to what was going on in the first 15-20 minutes of the film. So I think the film would have been better off starting off with the interviewing Cindor Reeves and his life story, and then afterwards showing us what's happened to Cindor Reeves and the danger he's in everyday life, because that first 15-20 minutes of the film was a little bit confusing, and I don't think that non-linear part to the start of the documentary wasn't really effective, at least for me. I give Betrayal 3.5 stars out of 5. After the rocky start, this film becomes quite thrilling and very engrossing. Cindor Reeves, the patriot of Liberia, he really comes across as a very relatable, down-to-earth type of guy who really risked his life for his own country. And we do really get a nice history lesson on the recent history of Liberia and the former disgraced dictator Charles Taylor. So I definitely recommend checking out this film if you're interested in that recent history of the African country Liberia. Thanks for watching. What did you think of Betrayal? Please comment below what you thought of the film. See you next time. Bye.